list here. Let's see. We'll start with Mr. Marc. That guy on the end, the cool guy with the glasses, that's Marc Bonilla. Marc Bonilla is a black belt in Taekwondo. Watch out.
That's how I've survived this business.
That's how you get the money.
He's also a solo artist and has lent his talents to collaborate with some of the finest people in the film and music industry. In addition to working with Keith Emerson and Ronnie Montrose, Bonilla can also be heard every week composing and playing guitar on the TV series Justified for the FX network. Give him a big hand. He's got some great pearls of wisdom to share. And I'm glad he's here. He's a cool guy. Next to him is my hero, Doug Pinnick. Doug Pinnick is the presiding minister of the First Church of Rock and Roll. He is also the bassist for the band King's X. He's also a prolific solo artist who can be heard with Eric Gales on PGP2, KXM with George Lynch, and his current project, Grinder Blues with Jabo Billman. Come on in, guys. Give him a big hand. Doug Pinnick. See, I wrote all this out. Grant Geissman, this guy. Now, he was here last year, and I did all this research, but I overlooked something really, really important about him, but I'll get to that in a second. Grant Geissman is a world-class Emmy-nominated composer and guitarist with over 14 solo albums to his credit. He's also a studio guitarist who's played on over a bazillion TV shows and film soundtracks. More importantly, Geissman played the guitar. He played, check this out, I was just talking about this with someone else. Geissman played solo guitar, a guitar solo on Chuck Mangione's Feel So Good, which is one of the baddest guitar solos. If you were in the 70s, they never talk about this in those, 70s shows or whatever, but everyone had that album, the Chuck Mangione, where he's doing this, Well, he played the guitar solo on that song, Feel So Good. I was like, damn, that's him. Anyway, it was just great solo. I just wanted to point that out. Hey, man, give him a big hand. Pete Thorn. Pete Thorn is a session cat, columnist for Premier Guitar Magazine, and one of the top touring pros in the music industry. His solo album, Guitar Nerd, is a rock guitar tour de force, and his online gear demos are the pinnacle of awesome. You can catch him on tour with Don Henley, Jewel, Chris Cornell, and Melissa Etheridge. Give him a big hand. Pete. Josh, the man here, Mr. Tattoo himself. Josh Smith is a blues man, Telecaster disciple, R&B guitar expert, and plays in the Raphael Sadiq Band. His latest album, Don't Give Up On Me, took us to the R&B side of the blues, but his up-and-coming album, which will be released next year, will feature Charlie Musselwhite, Kirk Fletcher, and Joe Bonamassa. It's going to be killer, and he's teasing us. Give him a big hand, Josh Smith. Let's start with you, Josh. Besides playing guitar, what was like the first thing that you fell into, where you realized I gotta supplement my income, my work ethic, and do other things to survive in this crazy world?
Okay, to supplement. Well, I moved here 12 years ago, and before I moved here, the only thing I wanted to do was my own music, be a blues guitarist and do that. And I kind of hit a wall with that, and that's why I moved here, was to be a sideman and try to do sessions, and that's worked out pretty well. But as everybody up here will tell you, this, no matter how busy you get, it's full of lulls in this business where, you'll have a year where you're working all the time and touring, and then I'll have a year where my wife wants to kill me because I'm just sitting on the couch all the time. And so, I started finding different ways to kind of supplement my income by doing, some music library recording stuff, by doing some music for video games. I have some friends that make video games that I lucked into. And a big thing, and I know it's big for Pete, is doing some gear demos and stuff. And it seems to be getting more and more getting asked to do that stuff. And Pete has taken it to the next level, but the quality of that stuff is amazing now. And there's a lot, you know, to be made there doing that stuff. So I've been doing that. And then just in the last year or two, I've started doing a lot more lesson stuff, which I never did before. You know, backing track stuff's on that Jam Track Central site, and lessons on this guitar breakdown website, and that's really been helpful. You know, you go in and show, you know, things that make me unique or whatever, and luckily some people have found that interesting, and then I get a check in my mailbox, and that really helps, you know, when people buy that stuff.
You also are diversified stylistically too.
Yeah, well that's kind of goes without saying, especially if you want to be a session guy or a sideman here. It's like, besides being able to pull all those different bags of styles, you got to have all that gear too to get those right sounds, and so it's like, man, it's a lot. It's actually a lot. I didn't realize that when I first moved here. I started making friends with guys who, you know, maybe they weren't like these unbelievable improvisers. Like, I thought I was going to come here and everybody was the greatest improviser on the face of the earth, and everybody was playing giant steps with their, you know, one hand. And no, it was the guys that were working all the time were the guys that had a Rickenbacker 12-string and a Vox and a lap steel and could play a little pedal steel and had a baritone guitar and had a Marshall and a Fender and could cop every tone, and they could listen to a tone before they went to the gig, and they knew, oh that's a telly through a high watt, you know, and I can get that tone perfect, you know, and that was a new skill I had to learn when I got here.
Yeah, I gotcha. Pete?
Well, I started touring mainly was the way I was making my money, and it got to the point where it was just like I found myself always searching for the next gig. You know, you never come home with quite as much as you think you're gonna. You know, bills catch up, and you're home for a month or two, and you're like, man, I need another gig. I gotta get back out on the road. And so I love touring and stuff, but I wanted to find ways to kind of diversify. And so with, you know, the advent of the internet taking off and stuff, the gear demo thing really did take off for me. You know, doing sessions and certainly lessons and stuff, like Tosh was saying, in the last year, you know, I put out a few lessons through the Jam Track Central site. That's great, you know. I see some of these guys, there's this guy Justin Sanderco, you know, Justin Guitar, he's got a site called justinguitar.com. He's got 2 very popular YouTube channels, and the guy blows my mind because he's got, I think he's up to like 300,000 subscribers or something, like, you know, 70 million views on both of his different YouTube channels now, and he kind of made that for himself. He made that job for himself by putting up free lessons on the internet. He's a good guitar player. He's done some sessions and stuff and done some touring and stuff. He's really solid. He explains things really well, and yeah, I think he just was like, you know, what can I do to kind of like diversify, and just started putting out all these free lessons, and it's unbelievable this kind of career he's created for himself.
And YouTube monetizes that, obviously.
Yep.
And then he gets a check.
Exactly.
But you have to like get over a certain period, like you have to get over 1 million views, and that's when something like that. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I've got that going on my site on a much smaller level, but you know, there's like you can monetize your videos, so you make a lesson video or a gear demo or something, and if you get involved with the Google AdSense thing and stuff, you can become a part of that, and then, you know, there'll be a movie trailer or something playing before your video, and you get paid every time somebody, you know, and it's not a lot of money, but it starting to, you know, it's like, hey, you know, this is starting to be something substantial for me, you know, so for Justin, I can't even imagine with the amount of video views he gets and subscribers. It's certainly got to be a decent amount of money he gets every month. So it's all these things, you know, just trying to figure out different, for me, like I say, it was really born out of, I didn't always want to be chasing the next gig, the next tour, and when you're doing that, you're always on the road. It's like, it's pretty tough to start a family or maintain a relationship or that kind of thing. So I wanted to be able to tour when I wanted to be able to more, and take the gigs that I wanted to take, as opposed to always feeling kind of desperate about having to go on the road. So that's really where this comes from.
But I noticed in your video, I love your videos, by the way, but
Thanks.
you've also, in terms of your engineering skills, and because you're filming yourself, you're alone,
right.
You're filming yourself, and you're also recording everything.
Right.
with the technology. You do the last one I saw you did was the JHS color box,
Right.
which was really good. And you do all the split screen stuff, and you show you playing bass and guitar and explaining how you program drums and everything. And that's, you know, it's one thing to know how to do that,
Right.
but you've got to be able to record it and video yourself doing all of that as a presentation. Now, you do all the editing yourself?
I do, yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of, I guess, like, rudimentary video editing ability I had to get to be able to do that. There's obviously, you know, you've got to have the musical thing together, your engineering chops to some degree. And also I have a background in, I mean, I worked in music stores forever, and I was also a teacher, so it's like those sort of being able to explain equipment and you know, in a concise way, I think is really important when you're doing those videos. Like cut to the chase and kind of, you know, don't, because, you know, when you look at YouTube statistics of somebody watching a video, it's like, it's pretty amazing how fast you know, they'll watch like the first 60 seconds or something, and a lot of people are clicking off after that. So you got to get to the point right away.
Right.
And that's a skill, I think, or something. But it's just a process of trying to figure all that stuff out, and you get better as you do it, you know, like with anything we do.
I learned that the hard way. You got to get to the point. We're in like a land of ADD, and if you don't grab them right away, bam, you're gone.
It's true, yeah.
Grant, how have you producing and doing sessions? How have you kind of tried to add things to your palette to generate income and be an artist?
Well, I mean, the truth is, the last 10, 11 years I've been incredibly fortunate because I co-write the music for 2.5 Men and also for Mike and Molly. So 2.5 Men, sadly, is ending this season, but I co-wrote the theme as well. And but Mike and Molly's probably going to go on for a while. So, but I mean, before that, I grew up in San Jose and moved down here when I was like maybe 20 or something like that, because I knew this is where all the music scene was happening. And so, you know, I moved down here and with an eye to doing session work, and I started doing literally like free rehearsal bands at the Union, and, you know, playing at Cal State Northridge in the jazz band, and so people started hearing me. And, you know, the Chuck Mangione thing came about just from a recommendation. Chuck was looking to add a guitar player for the first time to his band, and this guy Bill Reichenbach, who's a great jazz and studio trombone player, was a student of Chuck's who had moved out here, and he recommended me, and, you know, boom, one thing led to another. So I spent the next 4 or 5 years, you know, recording, being on TV shows with Chuck, you know, touring the world and whatever. But I don't really like traveling, so I was like, you know, I'm kind of done with this. And so I kind of reinvented myself, as you were talking about, it's reinvention, kind of as a session player, and I did that for many years. And, you know, my career's been like a series of sideways stepping stone things, like do one thing for a while, you know, kind of get bored with it or just whatever, and move to another stepping stone. You know, like as a session player around, you know, I guess 86, something like that, I started seeing guys come in with these little Macintosh computers with sequences on it, and it's like, wow, you know. So I figured out pretty quick that as a guitar player, I better learn how to sequence MIDI and get some piano skills going and start writing my own stuff, which I always did anyway, you know, writing my own kind of jazz tunes. And so that led to, you know, writing for music libraries, which, you know, by some weird convoluted way that led to writing for TV, and then I do my own albums, which kind of is of some validation that I'm not just a TV hack, you know, and it keeps my chops up, you know, as we were talking about it before the panel. Anyway, it's just, for me, it's just a series of these kind of sideways stepping stones, but I've been incredibly fortunate over the years, so.
Doug, it's time for you, man, because you're like the hardest working man, and you're like in 5 bands right now, right?
Yeah.
So, King's X just tours whenever they feel like it.
Well, we used to, but our drummer had a heart attack, so
Right.
he's out for 6 months.
How's he doing?
He's doing pretty good. It's his second heart attack in a year, so
Wow.
it's kind of weird.
Yeah, is he on the mend?
Yeah, he's going to be okay. He says he's going to be okay. My brother had 2 heart operations, and he was on crack, and he's fine, so.
There you go, resilience.
So I guess, yeah, the heart's a good thing.
Yeah.
But how to make a living at what I do. You know, after King's X came home, one tour in the hole, which was the first time ever, we realized that we can't do this way anymore. So we all backed off and everybody kind of went home and started doing their own thing, trying to figure out what to do. So I decided to move out to LA and to start bands with everybody that I knew. You know, anybody that had a semi-name, that had a following, put a band together with 2 or 3 people, and we could sell a handful of records and make a living. So I did it. I put 4 bands together, and it's doing pretty good, but that's just not going to last forever. These guys here are doing it right. You know, they've got, it's overwhelming what they do, because I can't wrap my head around it. So I got to either play bass or sing to make a living. So, you know, I sing on people's records, I play bass on the record or whatever. I'm sort of like a whore when it comes to that. I'll do what I need to do. But it's the bands that I put together, which was really cool. My band with KXM with George Lynch and Ray Luzier from Corn. I mean, the record came in at number 32 on Billboard, so it worked for me. But you know, this isn't gonna last forever. You know, you know, next year, what am I gonna do? So I'm still trying to figure it out. But for me, it's just putting side projects together and making a little money on the side and doing some tours and things like that.
Do you have any? You also do. You guest on other people's albums.
Yeah.
Any more of that coming up?
Not yet. No one's asked me lately, but hopefully it'll happen again. The things that these guys are talking about are what I'm pushing forward to. Things that you don't have to rely on a band to sell your product to people, because it just doesn't work anymore. You know, we're not selling CDs, you give them away now. They're a commercial, not anything else. So it's pretty rough, but I'm still trying to figure it out. You know, and experimenting is the only way we can do it, because this is a Wild West at this point. We've all lost our jobs, and now we're trying to find a new job, basically.
Right. So you, between King's X, Grinder Blues, KXM, PGP,
and 30-year experience,
and your solo records,
solo.
that you still need to do more. It's just not enough.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. Now everything's going good with these bands. It's just so many, and so all day I'm just dealing with each band. It's like having kids. When are we going to tour? Who can tour? Who can't tour? What can we do? You know. But luckily, there's how do I put it? We're getting a little recognition for it, so it keeps us pushing, and we're making a living at it. Not a big living, but it's working out. So that's the best thing I can say.
Yeah, I got you. Hey, Mark, last time we were talking about how you made the leap from playing clubs and meeting Ronnie Montrose, and then later going into television. Can you tell a little bit about that, how you made that connection?
How many jump in there?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah.
I think I know how to work one of these by now. Okay. I started up in, I was born up in Walnut Creek, California, which is up in the Bay Area there. And I met Ronnie up there during a production of one of my high school bands that I had up there. And then we connected from there. And that was about the time, it was in the late 70s, and so we worked together quite a bit. We exchanged favors, and I did work for him, he did work for me, and kind of guided me along and financed my first record that ended up being on Warner Brothers when I moved down here. But he took me in on his own nickel, and we did the whole record there. And this was about the time that the guitar instrumental stuff was taking off. So when I moved down here in 1990, I joined a band called Toy Matinee, which had a record out on Warner Brothers, and toured with them. And during one of the sessions that we did, or actually one of the radio programs we did, we were on Mark and Brian. Mark and Brian took a big interest in us, and I'm still friends with them to this day. I did all their Christmas show, musical directions every year when they were on. They took a big interest. We had them on, or they had us on the show, and we did 2 or 3 songs. And I was playing some lead apparently, and James Newton Howard, who was just getting started in the music or in the film industry, that he'd been playing with Elton John before then, and was doing some production, but he had just started. I think he was into like his 4th or 5th film. Was listening to it. I guess had the the radio on that day, and knew the manager of our band, called him and said, "Hey, who's the guitar player that's playing with your band?" And he told him who it was, and he said, "Geez, you know, I'd like to have him maybe come down and do some work for me on a couple of films." So I jumped at that chance and went in and did, I think it was American Heart and Diggstown were the first two that I did with him. And that turned into a pretty big relationship. I mean, I've done everything. The last film I did over here was The Bourne Supremacy, or Bourne Legacy, one of them. So it's been a long relationship. But the reason that I think that I stayed with him doing those things is because I came prepared. I really did my homework. I'm not a real good sight reader. I can read, I can write, but I'm not like an accomplished session guy that just come in and just sight read the stuff. That's not where my forte is. Now, if you give it to me, I can take it home, or if I hear it, I can play it pretty much back to you. The thing that I think that I was able to do was put a little grease to it, because a lot of the session cats here can play, but it's a question of what type of music you're going to play. If it's jazz, it's one thing. If it's rock, it can't just be sight read. You know, it has to be performed. And I think that may have been what I did, is I had a niche that I think is probably important for everybody here to realize, is if you want to make it, you have to kind of find an area in space where it's not real populated. And that always has to do with your mental thumbprint. In other words, what everybody is about here has to do with their own experience, their own musical upbringing, your economic factors. Anything that has to do with your personality is what you've been blessed with as an artist. And if you try to be somebody else, it's not going to work. You're doing an impression of somebody else. Now, we all do that when we start. We always, like, you know, I could do every Alvin Lee lick, every Hendrix lick. Well, not every Hendrix lick, but most people that I grew up emulating, I could pretty much nail them. I could do impressions of everybody. The problem was that I started to sound like everybody. That was an issue. But that's a natural progression. What you have to do is you have to take everything that you've learned and then reroute it through your brain in your own personality, because that's the only thing you're good at being is yourself. So I was able to do that with the kind of work that I was doing in town here. Is how do I look at it? I don't want to play it like this or that. I'd play it my own way, and it became a style that apparently enough people reacted to. So I think that that's one thing that's important when you're trying to make it here is to make sure that you are true to yourself and that you play what you feel. There's a little truth gland inside of you that tells you when you're doing it right. And you have to listen to that. There's a lot of guys that have kind of ignored that over the years, and they're kind of empty. So that's something that you really do have to follow. So I think that was one of the reasons that I was able to do what I did, because I was trying to be myself.
What's your niche? What's the
What's
thing
my
that you do?
niche?
What is the thing that you do?
I couldn't tell you that. I mean, if I could tell you that, then it would be a formula.
Right.
You know, you can't do that. I mean, Bukowski once said, as the spirit wanes, the form emerges. And what he means by that is basically when you stop having a passion for what you do and start analyzing it, you're in trouble. So it's, as long as you're true to yourself, somebody else will tell you what your style is. You want other people to talk about you. You don't want to talk about yourself. And that's the thing. So I couldn't even begin to tell you what my style, I can tell you it's honest, because I believe in what I'm doing. I'm not bullshitting anybody, you know, and I know when it's right emotionally, and that's what I go by. I just go by those road signs. If I feel like I've been added to by the end of the session as opposed to subtracted from, then I know I've done the job. You know, that it's always up to somebody else. Look, this business is all about, it's all subject to taste. It's not a science. So you can be one of the greatest players in the world, and somebody will not get you. They'll not understand where you're coming from. But that's natural, and you have to have a thick skin and not let any of that deter you if you're really serious about what you're doing. So.